So in this section, we're going to look at Django REST Framework. And you may have heard of it, you may haven't. It is perfectly fine if you've never heard of it. We're going to go over exactly what it is and introduce the concepts. So far in this series, we've talked about having a server on the internet that runs our Django project and how it interacts with a client, the computer you're on right now, for example, with the internet browser that you're using. But what if the company you worked for or you yourself wanted to create a mobile application or an interactive billboard or maybe a car app? Would you still be able to interact with your Django app running on the server? Let's take a look at how we interact with this project application from our different clients. And again, a client is just another name for something that's consuming or interacting with your application. So in this case, on a web browser, we get back an HTML file, which is perfectly normal, and our web browser knows exactly how to display this information. But it may not be ideal for a mobile application or some billboard or interactive screen or for displaying inside of a car's dashboard. So how can we use our current application in these other scenarios with these other clients? Is it even possible? And the answer is yes, it's very possible. And the answer lies in the data. So instead of returning an HTML file, we will just return the data, and the client, such as the mobile application, interactive billboard, or car dashboard, for example, can worry about how to display and interact with that information. We'll explain that in a second, but this might also be referred to as creating a web API, a REST API, or a RESTful API. So as we mentioned, instead of sending over an HTML file, we can just send over the data. And each of these clients, each of these consumers, can worry about how the information is displayed and interacted with on their end. And this data is typically formatted in a JSON format, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And so what is JSON format, JavaScript Object Notation, versus HTML? Well, let's take a closer look. An HTML file tells a web browser how and what to display. It tells it how to display the text, images, etc. Whereas a JSON file, or JSON formatted, is just a structured format for representing data. So let's take a look at some examples. This here is a paragraph tag that you might find in a HTML document. So the paragraph tag is telling the web browser to render this as a paragraph. And then there's also other text outside of just the data from the application. So it's telling the web browser to display "my name is," as well as the data from our application. And this might be totally suitable for a web browser, but the display on your car may not have any idea what a paragraph tag is, or may not want to see "my name is." On the other hand, JavaScript Object Notation looks very similar to a Python dictionary. It is a key-value pair. So in this case, it has a key of name and a value of John, and it doesn't specify anything regarding how it should be displayed or how it should look. It's just the structured data. Now, where does Django REST Framework come into this? And I mentioned you may have heard of Django REST Framework before. You may have not. That's totally fine. Django REST Framework is a library built on top of Django to create these web or REST APIs. It's basically a library that lets you turn your Django application into something that can be used by these various clients: web browsers, mobile applications, interactive billboards, car dashboards, anything that just needs to interact with the data. So now let's dive into the code and see how we can use Django REST Framework and how it actually works.